Half the planet watched the last World Cup final. Not half the people who like sports. Half of every human being alive. 3.7 billion people stopped what they were doing to watch 22 strangers chase a ball across a field. No concert, no election, no war, no event of any kind has ever held that much of the species' attention at the same time. And the strange part is, nobody designed it that way. Football wasn't engineered to take over the world. It just did. And the reason why goes back a lot further than you think. Football is played in more than 200 countries. FIFA, the organization that governs the sport, has 211 member associations. The United Nations has 193 member states. More countries play football than officially exist on the world stage. And the thing that makes this extraordinary isn't the number. It's the variety. Football is played in the favelas of Sao Paulo, and on frozen pitches in Iceland, in refugee camps and royal stadiums, in villages with no electricity, and cities with more people than some continents. There is no other human activity, not language, not religion, not music, that crosses every single border on Earth, the way football does. So how did one game do that? The obvious answer is England, and it's partially right. In 1863, representatives from a dozen London clubs met at the Freemasons' Tavern on Great Queen Street and agreed on a single set of rules. They formed the Football Association and wrote down 13 laws of the game. That moment is often called the birth of modern football. But England didn't invent the game. England just wrote it down. Because humans had been playing this exact game for thousands of years before anyone in London picked up a pen. In China, during the Han Dynasty more than 2,000 years ago, soldiers played a game called Cuju. A leather ball stuffed with feathers and animal hair, kicked through a small opening in a silk cloth stretched between two bamboo poles. FIFA officially recognizes Cuju as the earliest known form of football. In ancient Greece, they played episkyros, 2 teams, 1 ball, a line drawn in the dirt, each side trying to force the ball past the other. The Romans turned it into harpastum, a rougher version played by legionnaires to build stamina and aggression between military campaigns. And then there was medieval England. Before anyone codified anything, entire villages played a version of football with almost no rules. Hundreds of people on each side. The pitch wasn't a field. It was the distance between 2 neighboring towns. The ball was whatever was available, an inflated pig bladder, a bundle of rags, sometimes worse. Games lasted entire days. Players broke bones, trampled crops, and drowned crossing rivers mid-play. The English crown banned the sport at least 30 times between the 14th and 17th centuries. Nobody stopped playing, not once. And here's the part that makes all of this genuinely strange. The Aztecs had their own version. A rubber ball, a stone court, 2 teams, and stakes so high that some historical accounts describe the losing captain being sacrificed to the gods. In the Amazon, indigenous tribes who had zero contact with the outside world played their own ball games using spheres molded from hardened tree sap. Same structure, open space, 2 sides, 1 ball. No communication between any of these civilizations, no trade routes connecting them, no shared ancestry that could explain the overlap. They all invented the same game, independently, on opposite sides of the planet, over and over and over again. That's not cultural coincidence, that's instinct. So what is it about this specific structure? 2 groups, 1 ball, an open field, that keeps appearing everywhere humans exist? The answer sits at the intersection of evolutionary psychology and game design. And it's simpler than you'd expect. Football is the lowest barrier competitive activity humans have ever created. You need 1 ball. You don't even need a real one. Kids in rural Nigeria play with bundles of plastic bags tied together with string. Kids in the slums of Buenos Aires use crushed soda cans. You don't need equipment. You don't need a court with specific dimensions. You don't need a net, a hoop, a bat, or protective gear. You need ground and something round. That's it, but it goes deeper than cost. You don't need a specific body type. Basketball rewards height. American football rewards mass. Rugby rewards both. Gymnastics rewards small frames. Football rewards something entirely different. Speed, yes, but also vision. Creativity, timing, deception, and spatial intelligence. A 5'6" player from Argentina became the greatest of all time. A skinny teenager from a favela in Santos became the most celebrated athlete in human history. Your genetics don't disqualify you before you even start. Almost nothing else in competitive sport works like this. Football is the only major sport where the door is open to virtually every human body on Earth. And that matters more than most people realize. Because a sport that excludes nobody can be adopted by everybody. But accessibility alone doesn't explain obsession. Lots of games are simple. What makes football psychologically different from almost every other sport is something most fans have never consciously noticed. The scoring. Football is a low-scoring game. The average match produces roughly 2.5 goals across 90 minutes. Compare that to basketball, where teams regularly put up over 100 points each. Or cricket, where hundreds of runs pile up across hours. In those sports, each individual score is a small event. In football, a single goal can decide a World Cup. A single goal can define a career. And that scarcity does something powerful to your brain. In 1954, neuroscientist James Olds discovered that the dopamine system doesn't respond most strongly to receiving a reward. It responds most strongly to anticipating one. The longer you wait, the more uncertain the outcome. The bigger the neurochemical payoff when the reward finally arrives. Football is essentially a 90-minute dopamine engine, built on delayed gratification. Every attack that nearly results in a goal builds the tension higher. Every near miss, every crossbar, every diving save keeps the loop open. And when the ball finally hits the net, the release is chemically enormous, precisely because you waited for it. Precisely because it almost didn't happen. This is why football fans erupt louder than fans of almost any other sport on Earth. Not because the game is objectively better, because the brain chemistry of watching it is built on scarcity and anticipation, which are the two most powerful emotional drivers the human nervous system has. But good brain chemistry doesn't make a sport global by itself. What turned football from a popular game into a planetary phenomenon wasn't just the psychology, it was timing. The British Empire at its peak controlled roughly a quarter of the world's population, and everywhere the British went, every port, every colony, every railway line, football went with them. In the 1880s, British railroad workers introduced the game to Argentina. English sailors brought it to the ports of Brazil. Scottish factory managers set up the first clubs in Sao Paulo. British soldiers played matches in front of local crowds across West Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. The sport spread through the empire like a second language, and within a single generation, something unexpected happened. Local populations didn't just learn the game, they mastered it. And then they started beating the British at it. And this is the moment most people miss entirely. Football didn't stay a colonial import. It became a tool of resistance. In Brazil, the earliest football clubs were whites only. When black and mixed-race players were finally allowed to compete, they didn't mimic the stiff British style. They reinvented the game from the ground up. They brought ginga, a style of movement rooted in capoeira and samba, full of feints, body rolls, and improvisation that European defenders had never seen and couldn't stop. What the British played as a structured tactical exercise, Brazilians transformed into art, and they started winning everything. The same pattern repeated across the globe. In Argentina, football became the beating heart of the working class, a way for poor neighborhoods to matter. In newly independent African nations, fielding a national team became the fastest way to announce to the world that your country existed. In every culture that adopted the game was reshaped to reflect the people playing it. Football didn't flatten local identity the way most colonial exports did. It absorbed identity. It became a mirror. And that is something no other sport in history has ever managed to do. Because football is, at its deepest level, an empty structure. 2 goals, 1 ball, a set of rules simple enough to learn in 5 minutes. But inside that structure, anything is possible. The way a nation plays football tells you something true about that nation. The Brazilian, Gioco bonito, German. Efficiency, Italian defensive. Mastery, Spanish. Tiki-taka, the Dutch invention of total football. Same rules, same pitch, same ball. Completely different expressions of who those people are. Football doesn't just cross cultures, it becomes them. And here's what sits underneath all of it. The reason 3.7 billion people watch those 22 strangers chase a ball isn't really about the ball. It's about what football returns to the people who care about it. Belonging, identity, a shared reason to feel something enormous with complete strangers. A reason to scream next to someone you've never spoken to and feel for 90 minutes like you've known them your entire life. For most of human history, that feeling came from your tribe, your village, your people around a fire. You shared a hunt, you shared a meal. You shared survival itself. Modern life dissolved most of those bonds. We moved into cities full of strangers. We lost the village. We lost the fire. We kept the need. Football gave it back, not perfectly, not always peacefully, but consistently, across every culture, every continent, every generation, for over 150 years. A stadium full of 80,000 people singing the same chant is the closest most modern humans will ever come to the campfire their ancestors gathered around 100,000 years ago. Same instinct, same need, different fire. We didn't choose football because it was the best sport. We chose it because it was the most human one. A game simple enough for anyone to play, deep enough to carry the weight of a civilization, and emotional enough to make complete strangers feel like family for 90 minutes. And in a world that keeps finding new ways to pull people apart, that might be the most important thing a game has ever done.